Buxton to come out and talk to you. I want to thank him. Yes. Okay. There you are. Okay. And the gang at Alias for that great party last night. Thank you very much. And the Design Exchange. And I in particular want to thank the Alias gang for having a little pity on my voice, because they agreed to turn the music down so that we all wouldn't be hoarse this morning. And I appreciate it, and I stayed to the very end. It was great. It was great to talk. Bill Buxton, Alias, you know how they revolutionized the business.
Well, we'll start by putting the sacred cow in the front. And as we're waiting, it's hard to talk about your passions. I could talk about if I talk about that, I'd have to tell you about my horses, my wife, my research. But I thought that what I would do is talk about what's really getting me mad. And one of them is my computer. It doesn't seem to be working. How are we doing here? And the issue is, what have I been writing letters to the editor about recently, and calling up radio shows and ranting about? And that's what I'm going to talk about. And it's driven by those other passions, and I don't go insane because of those other passions. So that's about it. I want to talk about, in many ways, if we look at a lot of approaches in the political system and so on, we get very simple solutions, right? It's just common sense revolution, and so on and so forth. And I want to say that it's not that easy. But there's another part of the paradox, because scientists are supposed to play with paradoxes, is it's also not that hard. And it's just a question of where you're looking. So I want to talk about not the design of computers, not the design of visual effects and animation. I want to talk about the design of society and the design of the places where we live. And are you getting anywhere? Okay, let me just go. Here we go. Okay, so much for the slides. If you want to go under new documents, just go to Task Manager. No, go to Task Manager with Control-Alt-Delete. Kill that, and then go to Documents and load TED. All right, so the issue is in a sense, what's happening with your kids and so on. So you could say, who's this arrogant person who sort of says, how can you design society and so on and so forth? It seems like a fairly ridiculous thing to talk about. But let's be clear about a couple things. First of all, there's something called Kranzberg's law. And Kranzberg's law says that technology is not good, it's not bad, but nor is it neutral. Now what that means is that you're designing the future no matter what you're doing. And the question is, do you do it by design or do you let it be by accident? And is it possible to inform ourselves in such a way that it's less accident than it might otherwise be? Now the second thing is, I would say, is we should all change our vocabulary and stop talking about the word future in the singular, any more than you talk about mathematic. It's futures. There's more than one future. And as soon as you start using the word futures, then you are forced, you are compelled to make choice. Which of those futures do I want? And with that choice comes responsibility. Now, this comes down to the whole issue about design, because I said I was going to talk about design. And in my pathetic little mind, the way I define design is simply this. Design is choice. And there's two places where creativity and innovation can take place in that process of design. In the things that you enumerate, the creativity you bring in the things you enumerate to choose from, how broad is the set, and that's basically where de Bono and other people go in terms of lateral thinking. And the second place for creativity is in the heuristics that you bring to bear in selecting from among those things that you have enumerated. So there's these two places. Now, one of the things about that then says that you must make choices, and you must have heuristics for doing so, which actually says you must have a value system. And the question is, what's the currency? I have nothing wrong with this sort of economical-based payback approach to administration, to governance, and to funding research and the arts. But let's make sure that we agree on the currency. Is it health? Is it happiness? Is it learning? Is it money? There's a bunch of currencies. And the problem is, in my opinion, is that the economic calculations are using the wrong calculus, or at least the calculus is using the wrong currency. So to begin with, since it's morning and there's not enough to go around, you know, like here's some currency, okay? There's not enough handouts at this stupid thing, right? Oh, by the way, my first slide had, since I think this stuff, there may be something relevant at this conference to do with the future in our lives and our children. So this whole talk is addressed to the politicians and civil servants, representatives of our federal and provincial government who are here. Could you all raise your hand? I went through the list. There's not one. All right? So, now these, oh, sorry. I've been known to be called aggressive. Now, the thing about this is, this currency, this is chocolate money. So choose your currency, but I'm a fan of my favorite psychologist is a guy named Gibson, who talks about ecological design and ecological psychology and the affordances of objects. What's with this currency? This currency makes it really easy to put your money where your mouth is. All right? Now, let's go on and talk about things. So, I work in the computer graphics industry, so I'm going to talk about my passion. When I was a kid, I don't know, back in 1970, I wasn't such a kid. I was a music student at Queen's University. I had a motorcycle, one of my passions. I used to scream up. I was fascinated about music, and especially electronic music. The first computer I ever saw is the same one I'm positive was the first computer Paul Hoffert saw. It was up at the National Research Council. I'd drive up at night after classes to get on this damn computer because they were doing the coolest things. They were making animations up there. Pierre Faldez did Hunger. He was working during the days. When he spelled off, I'd go on at night and do music. Paul was doing music up there too. From that, some combination of the National Research Council and animation, the National Film Board, University of Toronto, University of Montreal, and University of Waterloo, Canada developed the poster child of the high-tech industry in Canada, the computer graphics industry. It is, without a doubt, driving the entire world. Right? Success story. Sheridan College, ILM, everybody, we're driving everything in the industry. Now, let's go to a little reality check. With the policies in place today, the criteria for getting funding for research, that project would not qualify. And if to the policies that are in place today, which are intended to drive innovation, research, and the quote-unquote knowledge-based digital economy, and this is true in the States too, that project wouldn't have happened. Because in those days, to use a computer that was the size of 10 refrigerators to make music and animation, what a stinking waste of money. These idiots fooling around and playing, and the only thing was that nobody noticed us for the most part. And we were cute and quaint and sort of got stuff. But the moment push came to shove, you know, you'd be slated squeezed out. Now the point I want to say is that maybe should be a thing to remind you, rethink your policies. Because maybe what you're trying to do is the wrong thing. And you're trying to catalyze the wrong thing. And I'm not worried about my industry. My industry is healthy. I'm worried about the equivalent things that brought artists and other people together to do incredible things that aren't getting funded today because they don't have economic relevance. If you can't point out who's the industrial partner, what are the products, and how many jobs are going to be created, you don't get funded. Now, let's go a little bit further, because there's a funny thing. See, the closer you get to Silicon Valley or to MIT, to the Media Lab, at least at MIT, the more people confuse invention with research. I tend to believe in scholarship, that maybe there is history, and maybe things didn't start with the invention of the semiconductor. So let me give you an example. And this drives where we have to go. If you look at things right now, everybody's talking about open source, right? Great thing, it's going to be the solution, it's going to put down Microsoft and blah, 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 and Linus Torvalds has done this wonderful thing. Well, guess what? It's as old as the hills. The greatest piece of scholarship in the English language was the development of the Oxford English Dictionary. And it was done through open source. And Murray, when he put out over the net a call for help from all these people, because to do it you had to trace the history of every word in the English language throughout history. Trace it through read, which means you had to read everything and extract how that word was used in everything from beginning to end of written language. Couldn't be done by a single person. Way more complicated, orders of magnitude more complicated than an operating system. And they did it 100 years ago, more than 100 years ago. And he went out over the net, but there was a network of booksellers, literary magazines, and newspapers. The point is, the physical network, the carrier, doesn't matter at Tinker's Dam. It's the social network that matters. And the technology is simply a prosthesis that affords and encourages or catalyzes, through the bias of the path of least resistance, whatever, the ability to enhance your ability to pursue those networks. So the question isn't, is it copper or is it fiber? Who gives a fat rat's ass? What matters is, what's the social structure you want to put on top of it? But if you have children in school or you're a teacher, maybe you should start thinking, or you're a taxpayer, maybe you should start thinking about, well, just a minute, who understands those kinds of networks? Is it engineers? No. Is it sociologists? Sort of. But they describe things, they don't design things. Is there a new way of thinking about sociology in the same way that a couple years ago people started to rethink psychology in terms of applied psychology? And you started thinking, okay, sociology becomes a design art. But all of a sudden you start thinking, maybe we shouldn't be cutting the sociology and humanities programs from universities because they're actually more important to success than the engineering school. They're all critical players. But then I can come back and say, oh yeah, well, let's talk about networks, but you know, it's this digital economy, man, we've got to get the networks out. And then I sort of say, well, just a minute. Let's take Sony, a technology company, right? They sell PlayStations and VCRs and crud like that. What's the most profitable part of Sony? Sony Music Canada. Not Sony Music in general, Sony Music Canada, most profitable division per capita of all around the world, in absolute terms, the most profitable in the music division, and per capita in the entire Sony organization. Why? Guess what? It's not because they got better engineers, it's because they got Celine Dion and a couple of people like that. Content. After you've got these networks, where the hell's the content going to come? But that doesn't matter. Let's cut the music programs at the schools. Let's cut the art programs. Who cares about that stuff, right? It's not important. Engineers are incompetent to solve these problems. They are relevant, they are not competent alone. Now, we have all kinds of networks. You know, like this, what is this, right? It's like it seems like a ball, right? But how you doing, Moses? Right? It's a telecommunications network. It's not a ball, it's an embedded computer. Things aren't what they seem, the forms. Right? You can't hear this, but if you...
How you doing, Moses?
Right? Right? We can make different kinds of networks to fit the task. What do? Let's see. We make computers like this. Now, I got to tell you something, because I was talking about design and the ability to change designs, okay? We're going to play Jeopardy. It's morning time. You got to wake up. Okay, here's the answer. What's the question? What's the question this technology was designed to answer? Come on, tell me. I need it. Bullshit. Where am I? Where am I? Because the technology of the day afforded sailing ships and the economics to grow and grow and grow. The wealth of nations was shipping over to England. Took 3 hours to compute where you were in terms of longitude. This meant, and by the way, at the complexity of third-year calculus by a midshipman who ran away from school to go to sea at 12 years old. Think about that, risking the wealth of nations to that, especially in today. Anyhow, changes is something you can do with grade 9 arithmetic, right? 360 degrees divided by 24, 15 degrees for every hour, offset from when the sun tells you it's noon versus your watch tells you when it's noon. Where am I? What it says is that the physical devices in our, you know, we all know this notion that notation is a tool of thought, thought begot language. There can be no thought without language, no language without thought. Be clear, the objects and artifacts in our environment are part of that external or representation or the notation that helps us deal with the complexity. And those we can design. And that's what architecture is about. And that's what Kranzberg was talking about. And we talk about this notion of the information revolution. What a crock, and I wish, now my brain's not going to work at all on this one, so Gail, you're going to have to help me. T.S. Eliot's Rock, The Rock. T.S. Eliot's The Rock, you know, like, where's the wisdom? We have lost in knowledge. Where is the knowledge? We've lost in information. Where is the information? We're falling into Gale's extension. Where's the information that we've lost in the data? Where's the data we've lost in the noise? Information isn't information until it informs and can serve as a basis for decision making. By that criterion, there is no information revolution. And our job, like the watch, is by design to reduce complexity so that we can navigate through this otherwise increasingly complex world and have power. What makes us think that we can do this? Well, let's knock down another myth. Let's get rid of the myth that the information, quote-unquote, revolution equates to the Industrial Revolution. Again, unadulterated horseshit, cow shit. What it is be clear to understand, at least in our Western society. In those days, the people affected were ill-equipped and disenfranchised economically, sociologically, and politically to have anything to say or do about what was going on. If you cut the cyberbabble out of the conversation, the issues facing us on these matters can be discussed in plain English. They're accessible to any citizen. And again, we come back, since they are accessible and since we are enfranchised, we have the power and therefore the responsibility to do something about it. Again, put your money where your mouth is. It's possible to do. Now, there's lots of ways that we can do it if we start to equip ourselves. Which brings me, if you go back to 1959, C.P. Snow gave a famous lecture called the Reed Lecture, where he brought out the term the two cultures, right? And he said at head table at Cambridge, sitting up there at dinner, the literary intellectuals sitting beside the scientists had absolutely nothing in terms of their passions that they could share or talk about. And yet, they were supposedly going to the same school and supposedly the same culture. And he said that a physicist from Cambridge and a physicist from India who had no common culture were culturally more attuned than those people who both went to Eton, but took those two different forks in the road. Let's revisit it today. Where are we now? Where we are today, if you ask that question, well, first of all, head table, they're all going to have something to talk about. They're going to say, how the hell do you make Microsoft Windows work, right? They're using the same tools. But, you know, it's such a cheap shot, I'm not even going to demean myself by taking that one. Far be it for me to pick on Microsoft's incompetence to innovate. Let me go a different way and say, right now, there is a fundamental mutual dependence. Okay? What's the most obscure humanistic thing? The furthest thing from science you can think of, and I would say perhaps biblical scholarship. What's the greatest advance to biblical scholarship recently? I would argue, or it's arguable, the Dead Sea Scrolls, building up through a concordance, basically bootlegging the Dead Sea Scrolls to the whole academic community to open them up. Couldn't be done without technology. Okay, that's one direction. Let's go the other direction. If notation is a tool of thought, you know, take the previous speaker. How was he communicated? How do they understand what they're doing? They do it through scientific visualization. Because if things are so small, they're stretched in time, you know, expanded or squished in time. Who understands visual communication? How to use color, how to use motion in order to make salient the things that are most important and get rid of the fluff? Other than people who perhaps are animators who went to art college. What I'm trying to say, you can't do good science without good art. And you can't do good art without good science. And by the way, when you're cutting those music programs, you better be damn sure to understand that probably 80% of Nobel Prize winners are competent artists. And maybe there's a correlation to their scientific creativity to the fact that maybe they had their creativity encouraged in the schools. Now the final thing, because I think I'm running out, right? Okay. Never happened before. Oh God, I'm sorry. Well, this is the, what's in the blender? Funny you should ask. The same thing that's in these Swiss Army knives, and some people call me overly competitive. I just call myself atypically Canadian. All right, competition. 2 Swiss Army knives here that represent your workstation you spend your life on. Okay, I'm going to toss one. Careful, it's not open. One there. Okay, I'm going to go there. Ready? Okay, find the saw. It's a race. Now, okay, you're under stress, okay? Now, while you're doing that, realize that that Swiss Army knife with the knife, fork, spoon, saw, leather punch, index, spoon is the same as this. That is, they follow exactly the same design philosophy as virtually all the computers in the world today. That is to say, it's a super appliance, one size fits all, no differentiation. There has been no progress in the design of computers since 1982, no matter what anybody else tells you. Go to my website if you want to get that argument. That's always the best cop-out. Now, why? They follow 4 common design assumptions. Number 1, you have one appliance that does many things. 2, you must do those things at the location where the appliance is. 3, you can only do one of them at a time. 4, only one person can do them at a time. And 5, and I can't count, 5 is there's an overhead of complexity to find the damn thing that you do want to do at that crummy location. And understand how that completely violates everything else we do. If you don't use a Cuisinart for everything you do for cooking, and you don't use, didn't find the saw yet? Okay, you win. He's the engineer. If you don't cook with the Cuisinart, you don't do everything else like with the Swiss Army knife, if all of the other appliances we use in our lives are specialized and have a location associated with them, then why do we accept that design, that brain-dead super appliance approach, Henry Ford, any color you want as long as it's got a mouse, keyboard, and CRT and graphical icons, in your day-to-day life? It's insane. Now, what we need to do is start specializing. It's not convergence, that's a lie, it's divergence, and put things in the right location. Louis Kahn has this great statement about space, and I believe the design of information space is exactly the same as architectural space. Words, this is going to be by memory again, sorry for those of you who know him. Words uttered to one another mean different things in one place than another. Where we do things is critical. We have special spaces for special things. And the design of technologies today completely ignore that. And therefore, we don't know where we are. Thank you.
You give away your wealth. It's like